Section 1. The Silent Watcher. The forest never felt safe at night, but tonight it felt like it was breathing with me, listening to my every shaky inhale, mocking every tear that streaked down my face. My boots crunched on the frosted leaves as I stumbled deeper into the dark, my body trembling not just from the cold, but from the humiliation still burning on my skin that I had begged at on my knees. My voice cracked, my pride shattered, and he hadn't even spared me a glance. The Alpha's decision had been final, at least in front of everyone. You don't belong here. Go back to where you came from. Those words still echoed in my skull like a curse. The pack had looked away, some with pity, most with disdain. I wasn't one of them. I wasn't wolf enough, strong enough, worthy enough. That rejection carved into my heart like a knife, sharper than anything I'd ever endured. But what they didn't know, what even I didn't know, was that the Alpha hadn't walked away when I collapsed in tears, that he had stayed, that he had watched, and his silence weighed heavier than any words. The forest swallowed me whole as I wandered, blind to direction. My breath came in short gasps, white clouds puffing into the night air. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called, its lonely cry only deepening my own sense of abandonment. The moon hung half full, casting pale shards of light through the twisted canopy. Every branch seemed to reach for me, snagging my coat, dragging me back like the pack's judgmental stares that I leaned against a tree, clutching the bark as if it could hold me upright. My chest heaved, sobs shaking through me uncontrollably. Please, I whispered into the silence, though I didn't even know who I was begging anymore. The moon goddess? Fate? Myself? Just once. Let me be enough. The words shattered into the cold air, fragile as glass. And then, the air shifted. It wasn't just the breeze. It was heavier, more purposeful, like the forest itself had turned its attention toward me. My skin prickled. My tears stilled. Instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs refused. I wasn't alone. I spun, my heart slamming against my ribs. Between the trees, a shadow moved. It wasn't human. Too tall, too still. My lungs froze mid-breath. Amber eyes caught the moonlight, glowing faintly, watching me from the darkness. Every story whispered about wolves came rushing back to me. The monsters lurking in the forest. The shifters who claimed they were protectors, but everyone knew they could be killers just as easily. My hands curled into fists, though I was trembling too hard to fight anything. Who's there? My voice cracked like brittle glass. I hated how weak I sounded, how desperate. The silence answered me, stretching until it pressed against my ears, suffocating. And then, a low sound, half growl, half breath. The figure didn't move closer, didn't retreat, just lingered, watching me with a patience that was more terrifying than any sudden attack. I staggered back, my boot catching on a root. I fell to my knees, dirt and leaves sticking to my palms. Again, always on my knees, always begging. Hot tears blurred my vision. I bit down on a sob, choking on the raw ache in my throat. Please, I whispered again. My voice broke into pieces. If you're going to kill me, just do it. Don't make me wait. The wind stirred. Leaves rustled. And for a moment, I swore I heard a voice. Low, gravel-edged, curling around my fear like smoke. Not yet. I blinked rapidly, my head snapping up, searching the shadows. But the figure was gone. The eyes, the presence, the suffocating weight of being watched. It had vanished as if swallowed by the night itself. A shudder ran down my spine. The kind that felt like a warning etched straight into my bones. Had I imagined it? Or had the Alpha, the same one who'd humiliated me in front of everyone, followed me here? The thought should have filled me with rage. Instead, my chest burned with something else. A confusing mixture of dread and heat. Because if it was him, then he hadn't left me after all. He had seen me break apart, every tear, every desperate word, and chosen to stay hidden. Why? The path back to the village blurred beneath my steps as I stumbled forward, dazed. My thoughts tangled like thorns. By the time the lantern lights came into view, I felt hollow, like I had left a piece of myself in that forest clearing. But the feeling of eyes on me didn't fade. Even as I stepped back into the familiar cluster of cabins, even as the faint chatter of pack life drifted across the square, I felt it. The ghost of a gaze burning at the back of my neck. I dared a glance over my shoulder. The treeline was dark, empty, silent, yet I knew that he was still there, watching, And though I had begged for death minutes ago, a terrible, secret part of me wanted him to keep watching. The night didn't end in peace. It ended in sleepless hours, staring at the cabin's ceiling while the echo of those amber eyes haunted me. And by dawn, one truth had already taken root inside me. The alpha might have rejected me in public, but in the shadows, he had claimed me with his silence. And the worst part was, I didn't know if I wanted to escape it. Section 2. The weight of his silence. The morning sun broke over the ridge, painting the forest in soft gold, but I felt no warmth. My cabin walls seemed thinner than ever, unable to keep out the memory of glowing amber eyes in the trees that I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, steady, unblinking, filled with something I couldn't name. Not cruelty, not pity, something heavier. But the worst part was how that gaze had followed me back into the village, as though it branded me in ways no one else could see. By the time I forced myself outside, the pack was already awake. Wolves moved with practiced ease, fetching water, trading goods, training in the square. Laughter carried in the cool air, but it wasn't mine to share. Their eyes slid over me like knives. Some lingered, whispering behind hands. Others simply ignored me, which somehow hurt more that I wasn't pack. Not truly. Still, I pulled my coat tighter and pushed forward, refusing to let them see how brittle I felt. As I passed the training grounds, I froze that he was there. The alpha command draped over him like a second skin as he sparred with two of his warriors. His movements were fluid, effortless, a predator who didn't need to prove he was the strongest. The morning light caught his dark hair, glinting off the sharp planes of his jaw. He didn't so much as glance at me, yet I couldn't tear my gaze away. The memory of last night burned in my mind, his shadow among the trees, his eyes gleaming like fire. Was it really him? Or just my desperation twisting shadows into monsters? Move along, one of the pack women hissed as she brushed past me. Her tone was laced with disdain, and heat flushed across my cheeks that I turned away, forcing my steps toward the water well. But the pull of him was impossible to shake. Even as distance grew between us, I felt it. That same invisible tether that had wrapped around me in the forest, like he was still watching by evening. I tried to convince myself it was madness, that I had imagined the voice, the eyes, the crushing weight of his presence. But fate seemed determined to tear away every excuse, because when night fell, and I returned to the forest's edge, the air shifted again. It started as a hush, the kind that silences even the crickets. My chest tightened. The trees swayed as though bowing to something unseen, and then I knew he was there. That I didn't see him at first, not clearly. Only the sense of him, like a shadow carved into the world itself. My heartbeat raced, but my body refused to run. Instead, I stepped closer. Why? My voice cracked in the stillness. Why follow me? No answer. My throat burned with unshed tears, but I forced the words out. Do you hate me that much? That you have to make sure I never forget it? Still silence. Still watching. The tears came anyway, hot against my cheeks. I hated that he saw me like this, broken and desperate, yet I couldn't stop. I begged you. My hands clenched at my sides. I begged you in front of everyone, and you didn't say a word. Do you know what that felt like? To fall apart while the pack laughed. My voice shattered, but in the spaces between sobs, I swore the air vibrated, like a low growl hidden in the wind that I swallowed hard, lifting my gaze toward the shadows. If you don't want me here, then end it. End me. Stop watching, stop tormenting me, and finish it. The forest held its breath, and then, movement. A figure shifted in the dark, closer now. Too close. The hairs on my arms rose as my pulse thundered in my ears. Amber eyes glowed again. Not 10 steps away that I froze. He stood there, half hidden, silent, but undeniable. Broad shoulders, towering height, power radiating from every line of his form. For a heartbeat, I couldn't breathe. Why? I whispered, the word barely leaving my lips. But he only watched me, gaze locked on mine with unbearable intensity. The silence stretched until my knees trembled. I wanted him to speak, to explain, to give me anything. But instead, he turned and melted back into the forest. That I fell to my knees again, gasping like the air had been ripped from my lungs. My chest ached with confusion, rage, and something far more dangerous, longing, because in that moment, I didn't just see rejection in his eyes. I saw conflict, war, as if some part of him wanted to reach for me. But something, pride, duty, fate, kept him chained. And it terrified me. Because if the alpha was fighting himself over me, what did that mean for us both? When I finally stumbled back to my cabin, exhaustion weighed down every limb, but my mind was alive. Clawing at the memory of those glowing eyes, sleep came in fragments. Dreams of wolves pacing the edge of my vision, of amber fire chasing me through the trees. Always watching, never touching. When dawn broke, one truth echoed louder than all the whispers of the pack. The alpha's silence wasn't indifference, it was possession, and I wasn't sure how long I could survive under the weight of it. Section 3. The Return. The gates of Silverpine rose before me like a scar I'd been forced to carry my entire life. Rusted iron, woven with old runes, loomed high against the fading dusk. Beyond them, the village pulsed with the heartbeat of the pack, fires glowing, voices carrying on the wind, the faint howl of wolves calling one another home. Once, the sound had been comfort. Now, it was poison. My boots crushed the gravel path as I walked forward, unflinching, every step loud enough to echo through the hollow spaces of my chest. They had left me broken years ago, rejected with cruelty sharp enough to carve me hollow. I'd begged then, on my knees in the dirt, humiliated before the pack, but I wasn't the same girl anymore that I had left weak. I had returned strong, and this time, I wasn't here to beg. The guards at the gate stiffened when they saw me. Recognition flashed in their eyes, followed swiftly by disbelief. One dropped the torch he was holding, the flames hissing as they kissed the earth. "You," he breathed. "Yes." My voice was steady, cold, unfamiliar even to my own ears. "Me." They exchanged frantic glances, uncertain whether to bar my way or bow. I let the silence stretch between us, let them feel the weight of it pressing into their bones. Finally, one found the courage to speak. "You were gone." I cut him off, my lips curving in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Yes, but wolves always find their way back home." I stepped forward, and though neither moved aside, neither dared stop me. The gates creaked open with a groan, as if even the iron itself remembered me. The village was exactly as I remembered. Wooden cabins with smoke curling from their chimneys. Worn paths trodden by bare feet and paws alike. The square where the pack gathered under the moonlight. And yet everything felt smaller now. Perhaps it was me who had grown larger, fiercer, heavier with the fire of revenge simmering in my veins. The whispers started the moment I stepped into the square. Faces turned. Voices rose, hushed but urgent. "Is that? It can't be, she's back." I let their disbelief feed me. Every widened eye, every slackened jaw was another thread sewing me whole. And then I felt it. The air shifted. Thickened. A presence stronger than the whispers. Sharper than the stares. My breath stilled in my throat that I didn't have to look to know he was there. The alpha. I turned slowly. My body thrumming with a storm I had waited years to unleash. He stood at the edge of the square. Taller than I remembered, shadows clinging to him like a second skin. His dark hair caught the lantern light, his sharp jaw carved from stone. His eyes, the same piercing amber that had once destroyed me, locked onto mine for a heartbeat. The world shrank until it was only us, the one who had broken me, and the woman he had created in the ruins of his rejection. His expression didn't flicker, but I saw it, the faint tightening of his jaw. The way his hand curled at his side. He hadn't expected me back, and certainly not like this. "Alpha," I said, my voice carrying across the square. Calm, measured, laced with venom sweet as honey. The crowd fell silent. Every ear strained, every breath caught. He didn't move, didn't speak, only watched me with that same unreadable intensity that once left me begging for scraps of affection. But I wasn't begging anymore. "I see nothing has changed," I continued, my gaze sweeping across the gathered wolves before returning to him. "The same square, the same whispers, the same eyes that turn away when it matters most." A murmur rippled through the crowd, but no one dared interrupt. I took another step forward, letting my shadow stretch across the dirt. "Do you remember, Alpha? The night you rejected me in front of them all? The night you let me fall apart at your feet?" The silence was deafening. I tilted my head, my lips curving. "I do. I remember every word, every face that looked away, Every second I was left to bleed alone. His amber gaze darkened, a storm gathering behind it. Good. Let him feel it. But beneath my steel, a dangerous truth clawed at me. His presence still burned. His silence still branded. And no matter how strong I'd become, no matter how much power pulsed in my veins now, my body remembered him. The mate I had once begged for. The one fate had chosen, even when he hadn't. My fingers curled into fists. I welcomed the pain in my palms. It grounded me, kept me from collapsing beneath the pull of that bond. I am not here for your forgiveness, I said, my voice ringing out like a vow. I am not here for your pack's acceptance. I am here to take back what was stolen, to burn what cannot be mended. Gasps broke out. Someone whispered my name like a prayer, another like a curse, but my gaze never left his. And for the first time, I thought I saw something crack in his perfect composure. A flicker of something raw, something dangerous. The torches hissed in the wind, shadows stretching long across the square. The night pressed closer, waiting, watching. So was he. And I knew, with bone-deep certainty, that this was only the beginning. He had rejected me once, but now, he would regret it. Section 4. The Alpha's eyes. The night had grown too quiet, the kind of quiet that wasn't peace, but tension, like the air itself braced for the storm. Wolves lingered around the square, their whispers curling like smoke in the cold air, their eyes darting between me and him. The Alpha, his gaze still pinned me in place. Those amber eyes burned like wildfire across the distance, stripping me bare, searching for the girl he had once destroyed. But she was gone. I made sure of it. Now, all that remained was the woman who had come back for blood. Leave us. His voice was low, sharp as flint. The command rolled through the square like thunder. Pack members stiffened, then scattered without protest, as if their very bones bent to his will. The bond of Alpha's authority was absolute. Soon, only the two of us remained in the dim light of the lanterns. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. I refused to break it. If he wanted words, he would have to bleed them first. Finally, he moved. Slow, deliberate steps that closed the distance between us. Each one made the ground beneath me feel smaller, until I was forced to tilt my chin up to meet his gaze. You shouldn't have come back, he said, my lips curved, though there was no smile in it. And yet, here I stand. His eyes narrowed, amber flashing like molten gold in the shadows. I caught the faintest twitch in his jaw, as though my defiance tasted bitter to him. You think strength erases weakness? His voice dropped lower, threading into my skin. You think the pack will forget what you were? I don't need them to forget, I said, my tone like steel drawn from fire. I only need them to see what I've become. For a moment, neither of us moved. His stare locked onto mine with a heat that seared down to the marrow. The world shrank until it was just him, just me, and the thread of fate pulling tighter with every second. My heart hammered, traitorous, reminding me of what once bound us. The mate bond, still alive, still electric, still cruel. I hated it. I craved it. Both truths warred inside me. He took another step closer, close enough that the lantern light revealed every hard line of his face. Close enough that I could feel the dangerous calm radiating off him. You think revenge makes you strong, he said. But you are still mine. That has never changed. The words struck me like claws to the chest. Mind that I swallowed the ache that clawed at my throat and forced myself to meet his gaze without flinching. Yours? You rejected me. You cast me aside like I was nothing. You made sure everyone saw my humiliation. Don't dare claim me now. His nostrils flared, his jaw tightening. The bond doesn't vanish with words, no matter how much you try to deny it. For a breathless second, the space between us crackled. His eyes softened, not with pity, but something darker, something raw. The weight of it nearly pulled me under, but I clenched my fists until my nails cut into my palms. I would not break. Not again. You're right, I said softly, letting my words sink like blades. The bond doesn't vanish. But what you don't understand, Alpha, is that it can be wielded. It can be used. And I will use it against you. His eyes darkened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty cross his perfect composure. Good. The air between us vibrated with things unspoken, dangerous, and heavy. My pulse thundered in my ears, but my face remained cold, unreadable. Then his lips curved, barely, but enough to reveal the edge of a predator's smile. "You think you can hurt me?" he asked, voice low and lethal. "I don't think," I whispered, stepping closer so our breaths mingled in the night air. "I know." A howl split the night before he could answer. It echoed from the forest, sharp and urgent. His head snapped toward the sound, and in an instant the alpha's mask of command returned. Duty called him away. But his eyes lingered on me for one last, searing moment. A silent warning, or perhaps a promise. Then he was gone, disappearing into the shadows with the lethal grace of the predator he was. The square was empty once more, but my chest was full, rage, grief, and something I refused to name twisting together until I could barely breathe that I turned toward the forest edge, my reflection faint in the dark windows of the cabins. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking at the broken girl he had rejected, that I was looking at the woman who would bring him to his knees. Section 5. The forest knows thee. Howl still echoed in my bones long after he vanished into the shadows. The alpha's eyes had burned into mine before he left, as if daring me to follow, or warning me not to. I couldn't tell which. That uncertainty gnawed at me until my skin felt too tight, until the silence of the square pressed against my ears like a weight I couldn't bear, that I should have gone back to my cabin. I should have shut the door, bolted it, and forced myself into a restless sleep. But I had not come back to Silverpine to obey him to S.O. When the forest called, I answered. The trees swallowed me in seconds. Their trunks stood like soldiers in endless formation, their leaves whispering above my head in a language I almost understood. The scent of damp earth and pine was thick in my lungs. Every step cracked twigs under my boots, the sound too loud in the heavy night. The deeper I went, the more I felt it, an energy beneath the forest floor, a hum that thrummed in time with my pulse. The land itself was alive. It knew me, and though I had once run from it in shame, it did not turn me away now. Then came the noise, low snarls, sharp snaps of teeth, the crash of bodies colliding in raw violence. The sound ripped through the silence like thunder. I froze, heart hammering. Then, as if my body belonged to something larger than my own will, I followed. The clearing was a wound carved into the trees, earth torn up by claws and blood soaking into the dirt. The fight raged at its center. The alpha moved like a storm unleashed. His wolf form was massive, larger than I remembered, his midnight fur bristling, amber eyes blazing with lethal focus. He struck with precision, every lunge and snap of his jaws designed to kill. His opponent, a rogue wolf, mangy and desperate, fought like an animal with nothing left to lose. Blood streaked its muzzle, its claws scrabbling for purchase as it darted and snapped. But the alpha was merciless. He slammed into the rogue with the force of an avalanche. The ground trembled. Snarls tore the air apart, so loud they rattled my ribs. He moved with brutal elegance, his power a living, breathing thing. I couldn't look away. Even covered in blood, even brutal, he was magnificent. The kind of predator others either followed or fled from. Once, I had begged for his protection. Now, I stood in the shadows, reminding myself that I didn't need it. Still, something inside me trembled. Not from fear, from recognition. The fight ended as suddenly as it had begun. The alpha pinned the rogue beneath his massive paws, jaws closing over its throat. There was a sickening crack, a whimper, and then silence. The clearing stilled. The forest exhaled. The rogue's body lay broken, lifeless. The alpha stood over it, chest heaving, fur bristling, a dark god at the center of carnage. His head lifted slowly, and then his gaze found me. I froze. My lungs forgot how to work. For a long moment, we simply stared at each other across the clearing. My heart pounded so hard I thought he could hear it from where he stood. And then, before my eyes, his body began to change. The shift was violent. Bones cracked, twisting into new shapes. Fur receded, replaced by skin taut over lean, brutal muscle. His spine arched, limbs reshaping, hands forming from paws still dripping blood. By the time it was over, he stood naked in the moonlight, tall, broad, powerful. Shadows clung to him like armor. But his eyes, those unrelenting amber eyes, glowed with a heat that pinned me in place. "You shouldn't be here," he said. Voice low, raw from the shift. I lifted my chin, though every nerve screamed at me to run. "You keep saying that. And yet here I am." Again, he stepped forward, the air tightening with every movement. Blood streaked across his chest, his jawline hard as stone, but nothing about him faltered. He radiated authority, danger, power. You don't understand what hunts these woods. Don't I? My voice sharpened, cutting through the night. Do you think I spent my years away hiding under blankets? I bled. I fought. I learned to survive without you, without your pack, without anyone. His expression didn't change, but I caught the faintest flicker in his eyes. A hesitation. I took another step into the clearing, the bond between us sparking, pulling, alive. You rejected me because you thought I was weak. But look at me now, Alpha. Do I still look weak? The silence stretched taut between us. The forest itself seemed to lean closer, listening. You've changed, he said finally, his voice carrying something I couldn't name. I laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. Of course I've changed. You saw to that the night you crushed me in front of everyone. You forged this fire, whether you wanted to or not. His eyes darkened, burning hotter. You think fire makes you untouchable? No. I stepped closer, until the space between us crackled with something raw and dangerous. My whisper tangled with his breath. Fire makes me unstoppable. For a second, the bond between us roared to life, dragging at me with invisible claws. My skin prickled, my chest ached, and my entire being screamed at me to close the distance. But I wouldn't. Not again. I forced my body to turn. Every step an act of rebellion against the pull that threatened to devour me. You'll see. Alpha, I said, not looking back. This time, I won't be the one kneeling. And then I walked into the shadows, leaving him behind in the clearing with blood still wet on his skin. The forest swallowed me whole again, but it didn't quiet. It whispered around me, restless, as though it had seen what passed between us and carried it in its roots. My pulse refused to settle. My hands trembled, though not from fear. The Alpha's eyes had burned into mine before he left, as if daring me to follow, or warning me not to. I couldn't tell which. That uncertainty gnawed at me until my skin felt too tight, until the silence of the square pressed against my ears like a weight I couldn't bear. That I should have gone back to my cabin. I should have shut the door, bolted it, and forced myself into a restless sleep. But I had not come back to Silverpine to obey him. When the forest called, I answered. The trees swallowed me in seconds. Their trunks stood like soldiers in endless formation, their leaves whispering above my head in a language I almost understood. The scent of damp earth and pine was thick in my lungs. Every step cracked twigs under my boots, the sound too loud in the heavy night. The deeper I went, the more I felt it. An energy beneath the forest floor, a hum that thrummed in time with my pulse. The land itself was alive. It knew me, and though I had once run from it in shame, it did not turn me away now. Then came the noise, low snarls, sharp snaps of teeth, the crash of bodies colliding in raw violence. The sound ripped through the silence like thunder. I froze, heart hammering. Then, as if my body belonged to something larger than my own will, I followed. The clearing was a wound carved into the trees, earth torn up by claws and blood soaking into the dirt. The fight raged at its center. The Alpha moved like a storm unleashed. His wolf form was massive, larger than I remembered, his midnight fur bristling, amber eyes blazing with lethal focus. He struck with precision, every lunge and snap of his jaws designed to kill. His opponent, a rogue wolf, mangy and desperate, fought like an animal with nothing left to lose. Blood streaked its muzzle, its claws scrabbling for purchase as it darted and snapped. But the Alpha was merciless. He slammed into the rogue with the force of an avalanche. The ground trembled. Snarls tore the air apart, so loud they rattled my ribs. He moved with brutal elegance, his power a living, breathing thing. I couldn't look away. Even covered in blood, even brutal, he was magnificent. The kind of predator others either followed or fled from. Once, I had begged for his protection. Now, I stood in the shadows, reminding myself that I didn't need it. Still, something inside me trembled. Not from fear, from recognition. The fight ended as suddenly as it had begun. The Alpha pinned the rogue beneath his massive paws, jaws closing over its throat. There was a sickening crack, a whimper, and then silence. The clearing stilled. The forest exhaled. The rogue's body lay broken, lifeless. The Alpha stood over it, chest heaving, fur bristling, a dark god at the center of carnage. His head lifted slowly, and then his gaze found me. I froze. My lungs forgot how to work. For a long moment, we simply stared at each other across the clearing. My heart pounded so hard I thought he could hear it from where he stood. And then, before my eyes, his body began to change. The shift was violent. Bones cracked, twisting into new shapes. Fur receded, replaced by skin taut over lean, brutal muscle. His spine arched, limbs reshaping, hands forming from paws still dripping blood by the time it was over. He stood naked in the moonlight, tall, broad, powerful. Shadows clung to him like armor. But his eyes, those unrelenting amber eyes, glowed with a heat that pinned me in place. "You shouldn't be here," he said. Voice low, raw from the shift. I lifted my chin, though every nerve screamed at me to run. "You keep saying that. And yet here I am. Again." He stepped forward, the air tightening with every movement. Blood streaked across his chest, his jawline hard as stone, but nothing about him faltered. He radiated authority, danger, power. "You don't understand what hunts these woods." "Don't I?" My voice sharpened, cutting through the night. "Do you think I spent my years away hiding under blankets? I bled. I fought. I learned to survive without you, without your pack, without anyone." His expression didn't change, but I caught the faintest flicker in his eyes. A hesitation. I took another step into the clearing, the bond between us sparking, pulling, alive. "You rejected me because you thought I was weak. But look at me now, Alpha. Do I still look weak?" The silence stretched taut between us. The forest itself seemed to lean closer, listening. "You've changed," he said finally, his voice carrying something I couldn't name. I laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "Of course I've changed. You saw to that the night you crushed me in front of everyone. You forged this fire, whether you wanted to or not." His eyes darkened, burning hotter. "You think fire makes you untouchable?" "No." I stepped closer, until the space between us crackled with something raw and dangerous. My whisper tangled with his breath. "Fire makes me unstoppable." For a second, the bond between us roared to life, dragging at me with invisible claws. My skin prickled, my chest ached, and my entire being screamed at me to close the distance. But I wouldn't. Not again. I forced my body to turn. Every step an act of rebellion against the pull that threatened to devour me. "You'll see, Alpha," I said, not looking back. "This time, I won't be the one kneeling." And then I walked into the shadows, leaving him behind in the clearing with blood still wet on his skin. The forest swallowed me whole again, but it didn't quiet. It whispered around me, restless, as though it had seen what passed between us and carried it in its roots. My pulse refused to settle. My hands trembled, though not from fear. His eyes burned behind my eyelids every time I blinked. His voice coiled in my head like smoke. And deep, deep in my chest, the bond thrummed like a curse I could neither kill nor escape. The forest knew my secret, and soon. So would he, because this wasn't just a return. It was the beginning of his undoing. Section 6. Whispers of the pack. The forest didn't let me go easily. Its shadows clung to my skin. Its silence pressed into my ears. Every step back toward the village felt heavier, as though the roots themselves wanted me to stay hidden among them. The clearing where the Alpha had spilled blood still burned behind my eyes. His wolf, his strength, the way he had looked at me when the rogue lay broken at his feet. The memory made my pulse stutter. Not from fear, from recognition. I shook it off and kept walking. If I let myself unravel now, the pack would smell it on me. Wolves always smelled weakness. Silver Pine's tavern came into view, its windows glowing golden against the dark. The scent of roasted meat and ale drifted toward me, familiar and sharp, carrying echoes of a life I had once belonged to. I hesitated only a second before pushing the door open. Inside, warmth and noise collided. Laughter, mugs clinking, boots pounding the floor in rhythm with some old hunting song. For a moment, it almost felt like home. Then silence fell. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Cups stilled in midair. Dozens of eyes turned to me, gleaming in the firelight. Yellow, amber, steel gray. All wolf. All watching. The song died. The air thickened. I stood on the threshold of the life that had once spit me out, and every gaze reminded me of it. "Well, well." Kara's voice cut through the quiet like a blade. She leaned against the bar, her braid tight against her skull, her smirk sharper than any fawn. She hadn't changed, still the alpha's favorite shadow, still venom disguised as silk. I almost didn't recognize you. Her eyes swept down me slowly, deliberately, lingering on the faint scars that mapped my arms. The shadows beneath my eyes. Almost. A ripple of laughter followed, cruel and brittle. I let it wash over me, then tilted my head, lips curving. You'd be surprised what someone becomes when they're forced to live without handouts, without protection. The laughter faltered. Kara's smirk stiffened that I walked deeper into the room, every step deliberate, my boots clicking against the wooden floor. I refused to shrink. If they wanted a show, I'd give them one. You're bold, muttered a grizzled veteran near the fire, eyes narrowing. But boldness doesn't erase shame. Do you think walking in here changes what you did? What he did? A murmur rippled around him. The rejection. The night I had been left broken in front of them all. The memory clung to the walls like smoke. They'd never forgotten, and they never let me forget either. My throat tightened, but I forced steel into my voice. I didn't come back for your approval. This land is mine as much as yours. The roots don't belong to your pride, and the sky doesn't bow to your alpha. A low growl rolled through the crowd, deep and collective. The way a pack voices its discontent without words. Good. Let them bare their teeth. I'd faced worse than their snarls. The tavern door slammed open, and the air changed. The alpha entered, tall and broad, his presence flooding the room like a storm surge. The chatter died instantly. Wolves shifted uncomfortably in their seats, heads bowing without command. My heart lurched against my ribs. He wore a dark shirt, damp with sweat and forest dew. His hair was tousled from the night hunt, and though no wounds marred his skin, the scent of blood clung to him still. His eyes, amber and merciless, swept the room once before locking onto mine. I didn't bow. I didn't move. The bond inside me stretched taut, humming painfully, a tether that refused to die no matter how much I willed it. Out. His voice was sharp enough to slice through bone. Chairs scraped, mugs clattered, boots shuffled. Within moments, the tavern emptied in a flurry of whispers and nervous glances. No one argued. No one lingered. Except me. We stood alone, the silence between us heavier than the walls themselves. You shouldn't provoke them, he said finally, stepping closer. His tone was low, warning. But beneath it, I heard something else, an edge I couldn't name. Why not? I shot back. Because they'll whisper? Because they'll remind me of the night you tore me down in front of them. His jaw flexed, a muscle twitching. Because they'll tear you apart. I laughed, though the sound was bitter. Let them try. I turned fully to him, and the air thickened. The bond pulsed violently between us, every nerve in my body sparking at his proximity. You still don't understand, do you? I whispered. I didn't come back to beg. I came back because this bond you tried to bury doesn't vanish on command. You can reject me all you want, but it doesn't change what we are. For a moment, just a breath, his mask cracked. Something raw flickered in his eyes. Regret? Hunger? Pain? I couldn't tell that it vanished as quickly as it came. His voice, when he spoke again, was cold stone. You don't know what you're playing with. And you don't know what you created the night you rejected me. The words landed like a strike, and silence followed, thick and suffocating. My chest rose and fell too fast, every breath laced with fury and something far more dangerous. Finally, he stepped back, though his gaze still pinned me where I stood. Stay out of the forest tonight. Then he turned and left, the door slamming behind him. I stood alone in the tavern, the fire still crackling, my pulse still racing. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the raw force of holding myself together under his gaze. That he thought he could order me. He thought his rejection had ended me, but the forest knew differently. It had whispered to me in the shadows. It had shown me blood and secrets, and soon, he would know too. This wasn't survival anymore. This was revenge, and I was only just beginning. Section 7, The Secret. Beneath the howl, the tavern's silence clung to me long after the alpha left. The fire snapped and hissed in the empty room, shadows licking the walls like restless spirits. My chest rose and fell too fast, as though his presence still pressed against me. Though he had vanished into the night, that I pressed my palms against the counter, grounding myself. That he thought he could order me. He thought one warning would make me retreat. But every time his eyes locked with mine, every time the bond burned between us, I caught something. something he was hiding. And if he thought I wouldn't dig for it, he had forgotten who I was. By morning, the whispers had already spread through Silverpine that I stepped outside my cabin to fetch water. And two women on the road fell silent mid-conversation, eyes darting away. A hunter carrying snares slowed his pace to stare before disappearing into the trees. Even the children playing near the well froze when they saw me, their mothers calling them back sharply, as though my shadow might taint them. The rejection had scarred me once. It had painted me as unworthy, a failure, a mistake. But this time, their whispers didn't cut. They fueled me. Kara found me by the well, her braids swinging, her mouth already curled into that serpent smile. "You really enjoy the attention, don't you?" She purred. The prodigal reject returns, and suddenly everyone forgets their place. She leaned close, her voice dropping. "Careful, Lyra. Not everyone is thrilled to see you breathing." I dipped the bucket into the water, watching ripples distort her reflection. "Good," I said flatly. "Let them choke on their discontent. Their fear keeps me warm." Her smile faltered, just slightly. Then she straightened, flicking imaginary dust from her sleeve. "Don't get comfortable. He may tolerate your presence, but the rest of us don't. And if you push too far..." She let the thread hang, sharp and deliberate that I didn't flinch. "I don't push. I burn." Her eyes narrowed before she turned on her heel, striding away with more force than grace. That night, unable to sleep, I wandered the village. The moon hung fat and low, draping the cabins in silver. Voices drifted from the meeting hall, muffled, urgent, laced with tension that I should have turned away. Instead, I crept closer. Through a crack in the wooden wall, I saw them, the Alpha and his council. Their faces grim, their voices heavy with secrets. "She grows bolder," one man muttered. "If she keeps provoking the pack, she shouldn't even be here," another snapped. "She was rejected. That bond should be ashes by now." But it was the Alpha's voice that rooted me in place. "It isn't," he said, low and rough. "The bond endures." A hush fell. Even the fire in the hearth seemed to dim. One of the elders leaned forward. "You rejected her. You severed the tie." His jaw tightened. "I tried." The words sent a chill down my spine. "Tried? She shouldn't still feel it. Neither should you." His silence was louder than an admission that I pressed a hand to my chest, where the bond still thrummed like a living thing. He had felt it too. All these years, all this time, I hadn't been alone in the ache. Why hide it? Why condemn me to suffering while pretending he was free? I shifted closer, straining to hear. The Alpha's voice lowered. "She cannot know the truth. If she does, everything unravels." Truth. The word struck me harder than a blow. They were hiding something, something tied to the rejection. Something deeper than pride or cruelty. My nails dug into the wood as the need for answers blazed through me. A floorboard creaked beneath my weight. The sound was soft, but sharp enough in the silence to snap every head toward the wall. "Who's there?" A voice barked. I darted back into the shadows before they reached the door, pressing myself against the cabin's side, breath locked in my throat. Boots thudded against the earth, searching, sniffing. "Nothing," one of them muttered finally. "Probably an animal." The Alpha lingered in the doorway, his gaze sweeping the dark. My heart stuttered as his eyes seemed to catch mine, though he couldn't possibly see me. Could he? Then, slowly, he turned back inside. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake in my cabin, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word. She cannot know the truth. So much of my suffering had been built on his rejection. The shame, the exile, the years of clawing myself back from the edge. And now I learned it wasn't as simple as cruelty or indifference. The bond still bound him too. He had tried to kill it and failed. Why? What truth was so dangerous it had to be buried beneath my pain? The next morning, I found myself drawn back into the forest, as though the trees themselves might whisper answers. Dew clung to the grass, the air thick with the scent of moss and pine. Birds scattered at my approach, wings flashing silver in the early light. The bond pulsed faintly, tugging me deeper, until I reached the same clearing where he had fought the rogue. The earth still bore scars of the battle, claw marks gouged deep, blood dried black in the dirt. I knelt, pressing my fingers to the soil, and then I felt it. A hum. Not the pulse of the bond, something older, buried beneath the ground itself. Energy thrumming like a heartbeat, ancient and alive. The forest knew the truth. It guarded it. And if the alpha wouldn't speak, the land itself would. A snap of branches jolted me upright. He emerged from the trees like a shadow made flesh. His shirt loose, his eyes burning. "You never listen," he said. Voice low, almost dangerous. I straightened. "Why should I, when you only ever give commands, never answers?" His gaze cut to the ground where my hand had pressed, and something flickered across his face. Alarm, maybe even fear. "You shouldn't be here." I stepped closer, refusing to yield. "Then tell me why. Tell me why you rejected me, but still feel the bond. Tell me what truth you bury in silence." His jaw clenched, muscles rigid, as though the words threatened to claw their way out against his will. Finally, he turned, shoulders taut. Some truths destroy more than rejection ever could. Then he vanished into the trees, leaving me shaking with fury and determination. I stared at the empty clearing, breath ragged, fists clenched. If he wouldn't give me answers, I'd rip them from the shadows myself. Because whatever truth he hid, it wasn't just his secret, it was mine too. And when I uncovered it, the alpha who thought he could break me would realize the truth was the one thing he could never bury. Section 8. Whispers. Beneath the moonlight, the forest was too quiet. Alara felt it before she heard it. An unnatural stillness that pressed against her chest like a weight. No insects hummed, no owls called, no leaves whispered overhead. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the frantic pounding of her own heart as she stumbled deeper into the trees. Her torn skirts brushed against brambles, snagging until she yanked them free. Every step seemed louder than it should have been, crunching twigs underfoot, echoing into the dark like a warning. She's here. She's vulnerable. She shouldn't have left the cottage. She knew that now. But when the shadows had crept across the floorboards and her chest had tightened with that suffocating feeling, the sense of eyes watching, she couldn't stay locked inside. She had needed air. She had needed to move. And now, she was lost in the woods with something following her. She could feel it. Branches shifted high above, too heavy, too deliberate for mere wind. Alara froze, her breath frosting the night air. Her eyes darted, desperate, searching. Nothing but shadows and the pale gleam of the moon filtering through the canopy. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice barely louder than the leaves crunching beneath her boots. Silence. Her chest ached as she forced herself to move again, faster this time. She didn't dare look back. She knew if she did, she would see glowing eyes staring through the dark, waiting for her to falter. Her foot caught on a root, and she stumbled, hitting the ground hard. Pain shot through her palms and knees as dirt smeared across her skin. Alara bit back a sob, pushing herself up, but the air shifted behind her. The presence was closer. "Please," she whispered, though she didn't know who she was begging. The word trembled out of her throat, raw, desperate, the same way it had in her dreams, always crying, always pleading with a faceless shadow that refused to answer. And this time, she wasn't alone. A growl rumbled through the trees. Low, guttural, vibrating through the earth itself. It froze her blood, locked her bones in place. Slowly, achingly slowly, she turned her head. Two eyes gleamed from the shadows, bright as molten gold. The creature stepped forward. Massive paws pressed into the dirt, muscles rippling beneath a coat blacker than midnight. His head lowered, ears pinned, lips curled back over sharp teeth that caught the moonlight. A wolf. A predator. But far, far larger than any she had ever seen. Alara's breath caught in her throat. Instinct screamed at her to run, but her body refused to move. Her pulse thundered in her ears as the beast circled her, its gaze never leaving hers. It was studying her, measuring her, and then, just for a heartbeat, the growl softened, almost as if the sound shifted into something else. A sigh, a question. The world tilted. Alara squeezed her eyes shut, her hands trembling as she whispered, "Please, don't." Her words broke, strangled by tears. She hated herself for it, for sounding weak, for begging. But the silence pressed in again, and she couldn't hold it back. "I don't want to die." The wolf stilled. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The air between them thickened, charged with something that felt almost alive, and though Alara couldn't explain it, couldn't understand why, her tears slipped faster down her cheeks. Because in that stillness, she felt watched. Not hunted, not prey, but seen. As though the golden eyes staring into her soul carried more than just animal hunger, they carried understanding. She lifted her gaze again, just as the wolf's ears twitched toward the distance. A rustle broke the silence, not from him, but from deeper within the forest. Heavy footsteps. More than one. Alara's stomach turned to stone. The wolf moved before she could think, placing itself between her and the sound. Muscles coiled, hackles raised, a growl vibrating low in his throat. Something else was coming. Figures emerged from the treeline. 3 men, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark clothes that clung like shadows. Their eyes gleamed unnaturally in the dim light, and the smirks curling their lips made Alara's skin crawl. Well, well, one drawled, his gaze flicking over her with a predator's delight. What do we have here? Another stepped forward, sniffing the air, his grin widening. A lost lamb. And his eyes narrowed on the massive black wolf. And the alpha himself. Alara's heart stopped. Alpha, the word burned into her skull. A spark of memory igniting. Half-remembered warnings from her childhood. Whispered tales of shifters that ruled the night. Men who could become beasts. Alphas who commanded entire packs with a single glance. Her gaze snapped back to the wolf. To those golden eyes fixed on the intruders, he wasn't just an animal, he was something else. The men shifted uneasily, though their smirks didn't fade. One lifted a silver blade, letting it catch the moonlight. Step aside, Alpha. The girl's not your concern. The wolf's growl deepened, vibrating through Alara's bones. Her breath came in shallow bursts as realization struck her like lightning. He wasn't protecting himself. He was protecting her. The men advanced. The alpha lunged. The forest erupted into chaos. Teeth flashed. Claws ripped through the dark. The sound of bone cracking and snarls tearing the night apart filled the clearing. Alara stumbled backward, her vision spinning as shadows collided before her. The 3 men fought savagely, moving with unnatural speed, but the wolf was faster, stronger. His massive frame moved like a storm, every strike fueled by raw power and precision. Blood sprayed, thudding against the ground, against bark, against her trembling hands. That it was too much. Too violent, too real, and yet she couldn't look away. The last man fell with a scream, silenced abruptly as the wolf's jaws closed around his throat. Silence rushed back into the forest, broken only by Alara's ragged breathing. The wolf stood over the fallen bodies, chest heaving, his coat streaked with blood that wasn't his own. Slowly, he turned. Their eyes locked again. Alara's breath caught, her chest tightening until it hurt. She wanted to thank him. She wanted to scream. She wanted to demand answers to questions she didn't dare ask. But before she could speak, the wolf stepped back. His form shimmered, blurred at the edges as though the moonlight itself was tearing him apart. The sound of bones cracking, reshaping filled the air. Alara's stomach lurched as the wolf fell to its knees. No, not knees, hands. A man knelt before her, broad shoulders rising and falling with every breath. His skin glistened with sweat and streaks of blood. His hair dark as the wolf's fur had been. And his eyes, those same golden eyes, lifted to meet hers. Alara staggered back, her world spinning. The alpha was no myth, that he was real, and he had just saved her life. Section 9. Bound by a shadow, the night still smelled of blood. Alara stumbled through the trees, her breath hitching as she clutched at the rough bark of a trunk to steady herself. Behind her, the forest lay broken, branches snapped, earth torn. The bodies of those men she didn't dare name littered the clearing like discarded nightmares. But worse than the carnage was the man who had emerged from it. The wolf had vanished into him. Or perhaps he had always been the wolf. She didn't know which truth terrified her more. His golden eyes burned in her mind, bright and unrelenting, refusing to let her breathe. She had begged. He had heard. And now she could not escape him. Alara. Her name drifted after her, low and rough. Not shouted, but carried on the night like a command. She froze, her hand pressed against the bark, her entire body trembling. He hadn't asked her name. She had never given it. And yet, he spoke it as though he had always known. Slowly, she turned. The alpha stood in the clearing's edge, the moon painting his bare skin in silver and shadow. His chest still rose and fell with the remnants of battle, his hands streaked with blood, but he was calm now. Too calm, as though violence lived in his bones like second nature. His gaze found her instantly. Always, it found her. Don't run, he said, his voice dark silk stretched taut. The forest won't let you. Her lips parted, 1,000 words clawing for release, but none came. She wanted to demand what he was, what he wanted, how he knew her name. Instead, what spilled out was a broken whisper. Why me? The alpha tilted his head, studying her the way the wolf had. His eyes flickered with something dangerous, something that felt like hunger, but not for her flesh. Something deeper. You asked, he said simply. Her knees buckled. I didn't ask for you. Yes, he murmured, stepping forward, his shadow spilling long across the ground. You did. Her pulse throbbed in her throat as he drew closer, each step deliberate, controlled, as though he stalked prey he already owned. She stumbled back, branches clawing her arms, but he didn't quicken his pace. He didn't need to. His presence alone closed the space between them. Alara's back hit another tree, rough bark biting into her skin. She pressed herself against it, trying to hold her ground even as terror and something far more dangerous warred inside her chest. You saved me, she forced out, her voice trembling. But you're no better than them. She swallowed. You're a monster. The word should have stung. It should have driven him away. But the alpha only stopped a breath away from her, his golden eyes burning brighter, his lips curving into the faintest shadow of a smile that chilled her blood. Then why, he asked softly, does your heart race for me? Heat flooded her cheeks, shame clawing up her throat. Her pulse thundered, betraying her even as she shook her head violently. It's fear. Is it? The words slid over her like a caress, and for one horrifying moment, she wasn't sure anymore. The air between them vibrated, alive, charged with something she couldn't name but couldn't deny. Every breath felt like drowning and burning all at once. I don't want you, she whispered. His gaze softened, not in pity, not in kindness, but with the slow certainty of a predator who knows the chase has only just begun. You don't have to want me, he said. Fate already decided. Alara's heart lurched. Fate. The word wrapped around her like chains, like a curse she didn't understand but couldn't ignore. What does that mean? She demanded, her voice cracking as fear and anger bled together. The alpha didn't answer. Instead, he reached out, fingers brushing against her wrist. The touch was searing, sending sparks racing up her arm, a jolt that made her gasp. His eyes darkened at the sound, and for a heartbeat, he looked less like a man, less like a wolf, and more like something caught in between, something ancient and unstoppable. She tore her hand back, clutching it to her chest. Stay away from me. For the first time, his expression shifted. A flicker of tension passed across his jaw, and his voice dropped into something dangerous, something that made the air thrum. I can't. The forest seemed to lean in, the silence pressing heavy around them. As though the world itself waited for her next breath, Alara's chest rose and fell rapidly, her lungs burning. She wanted to scream, to run, to vanish into the shadows. But deep inside, another part of her, small, treacherous, impossible, wondered what it would be like to let those words be true. She forced herself to speak, though her voice trembled. If you won't let me go, then tell me who you are. The alpha stepped back at last, but not far. His gaze never wavered as he straightened to his full height, the moonlight framing him in silver fire. My name, he said, each syllable a vow, is Kalen, alpha of this land. The one you begged, though you didn't know it. Alara's lips parted, her heart hammering painfully. His name clung to the air, heavy with power, echoing in her chest like a drumbeat she couldn't silence. And though every instinct screamed to deny it, to turn and run, one truth cut sharper than the rest. She had begged, and he had answered. Section 10. The forest's claim. Alara ran. Branches whipped her arms, roots clawed at her skirts, and stones cut into her feet, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. The echo of his voice, his name, still rang in her ears, wrapping around her like shackles she couldn't break. Kalen, the alpha, the one who had heard her pleas, who had stepped from the shadows not as a man, not as a beast, but as something worse. Both. The forest pressed closer with every stride, its trees looming like sentinels, their branches interlocking to blot out the moon. She had thought running would free her, that if she could just put enough distance between herself and him, she might breathe again. But the deeper she fled, the clearer it became. The woods weren't letting her go. Leaves rustled, but no wind stirred them. The path bent unnaturally, curving her back toward the clearing she fought to escape. Her lungs burned, her legs trembled, and still, every turn, every desperate change of direction, brought her back to where the night had bled red. The forest was his. Her chest heaved as she stumbled into a hollow, collapsing against the trunk of an ancient oak. Bark scraped her palms as she pressed herself to it, forcing air into her lungs, forcing her mind to quiet the tremor of her pulse. Think. There had to be a way out. There had to. Running will only tire you. Alara's breath shattered. The voice came not as a shout, but as a murmur carried by the trees, low and rough and far too close. She whipped her head around, searching the shadows, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. "I don't want this," she whispered. Though whether to herself or to him, she didn't know. A pause. Then the faint crunch of leaves beneath deliberate footsteps. And yet, Kalen's voice slid through the dark. "Velvet over steel, you asked for me." "No." Alara's cry broke into the night. She pushed away from the tree, spinning toward the sound. "I didn't know. I didn't mean." The shadows shifted. He emerged from them as though the darkness itself parted for him, bare chest glistening with sweat, his form carved by moonlight. The golden burn of his eyes found her instantly, locking her in place. "You begged," he said softly, each word a chain. "And I answered." Alara shook her head violently, backing away until her heel caught on a root. "That wasn't for you. It was just fear. It was." His steps were unhurried, predatory. "Fear or not, your voice reached me." The oak's roots tangled around her ankles, holding her where she stood. Her throat ached with the weight of words she couldn't speak, because somewhere inside, beneath the terror, beneath the denial, was the truth she couldn't shake. She had begged. And he had come. Alara's nails dug into her palms as she forced herself to meet his gaze. "What are you going to do with me?" Kalen stopped mere steps away, his presence filling the hollow, pressing down on her until her knees threatened to give out. He studied her, slow and intent, like the wolf had before. His gaze lingered on her face, her trembling lips, the way her chest rose and fell in uneven gasps. Finally, he spoke. "Protect you." The words landed like a blow. She blinked, confusion warring with disbelief. "Protect me? From what?" His jaw tightened, his golden eyes flickering with something she couldn't read. "From everything else that hunts in these woods." Her stomach twisted. "And what about you?" The corner of his mouth curved. Not quite a smile, not quite a threat. "I don't hunt what's already mine." Her breath hitched, heat flooding her cheeks in betrayal of her terror. "I'm not yours." Kalen stepped closer, and though he didn't touch her, the air between them seemed to crackle, alive, charged. "Fate disagrees." Alara's pulse thundered. "Fate." The word struck her again, heavier this time, settling into her chest like a curse. She wanted to scream at him, to deny him, to tear herself free of the invisible threads he wrapped around her. But when she opened her mouth, only one word came. "Why?" The alpha's gaze softened, just slightly. Not gentle, never gentle, but with a shadow of something almost human, almost vulnerable. "Because the moment you begged," he said, voice low and steady, "you bound yourself to me. And now, the forest knows it. The pack knows it. The night itself knows it." Her throat closed, her vision blurring. She shook her head, whispering, "No, no, that can't." His hand rose suddenly, and for an instant, she thought he would touch her again. Her body tensed, her breath snagging in her chest. But his fingers stopped just shy of her cheek, lingering in the air like a promise or a warning. "You'll understand," he murmured. In time, Alara squeezed her eyes shut, pressing herself harder against the tree, wishing she could melt into its bark, wishing she could wake up from this nightmare. When she opened them again, he was gone. The hollow was empty, the air still thick with his presence. But his form had vanished into the shadows. The silence pressed back in, heavier than before, broken only by the frantic rhythm of her own heart. Alara slid to the ground, her body shaking, her mind reeling. Her hands curled into fists against her knees as hot tears spilled down her cheeks. He was wrong. He had to be wrong. Fate didn't decide for her. And yet, even as she whispered the denial into the dark, she knew she would never forget the weight of his gaze, the fire of his touch, or the vow in his voice. The forest will always lead you back to me. The words burned like a brand. And no matter how tightly she pressed her palms to her ears, she couldn't silence them. Section 11. Shadows in the village. The village looked almost ordinary under the pale blush of dawn. Roofs dusted with dew, smoke curling from chimneys. The familiar scent of bread rising in ovens drifted through the air, warm and comforting. Yet to Alara, nothing felt the same. She clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders, though the morning carried no chill. Each step along the cobbled path felt like walking through a dream. Disconnected, fragile, unreal. The world moved as it always had, neighbors greeting one another, children chasing each other past market stalls. But she couldn't forget the forest that couldn't forget him. Every echo of her footsteps dragged her back to that hollow, to the way the Alpha had appeared from shadow. His voice like molten steel wrapping around her. I don't hunt what's already mine. Her stomach clenched, nausea rolling through her. She wanted to scream, to tell herself it was nothing more than a trick of the night. But her skin still burned where his presence had been. Her ears still rang with his vow. Alara? She flinched, her head snapping toward the sound. An old woman, Marin, leaned on her cane beside a stall of herbs, her gray hair braided neatly. Her wrinkled eyes softened with concern. Child, you look pale. Did the forest trouble you again? Again, her heart lurched. She forced a smile that wavered at the corners. Just bad dreams. Marin nodded slowly, knowingly, as though she'd heard that excuse before. The woods are restless. They've always had their ways, but lately, she lowered her voice. People speak of shadows that follow too close. Wolves where no wolves should be. Alara's breath caught. Her fingers dug into her shawl, her voice trembling. Wolves. Marin's gaze lingered on her, unreadable, before she finally shook her head. Best not to speak of such things in daylight. She pressed a small pouch of herbs into Alara's hand. For your nerves. Boil them with honey. Rest. Alara murmured thanks and hurried away, her heart hammering. She should go home. Hide. Pretend none of it happened. But her legs betrayed her, carrying her not toward her cottage, but toward the well in the square, toward the murmurs of villagers clustered in hushed tones. Tracks, larger than any wolf. Near the outer fields. Fresh, as though it circled. The Alpha. Alara froze. The crowd shifted, lowering their voices. But the name seared through her like fire. Alpha. They said it so casually, unaware that she had seen him, spoken to him, felt the weight of his gaze. She forced herself to breathe, to smooth her features into blank calm. If anyone noticed the way her hands trembled, they said nothing. Alara. The voice was bright, familiar, and for the first time that morning, her chest loosened. Leora, her dearest friend, waved from across the square, her auburn hair catching the sunlight like flame. She bounded toward her, her skirt swishing around her ankles. I thought you'd be resting, Leora said, catching her hands. Her smile faltered at Alara's expression. What's wrong? Alara tried to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. She wanted to tell her everything, that she'd begged in the woods, that the Alpha had come, that he'd claimed her. But fear strangled her tongue. What if Leora didn't believe her? Worse, what if she did? I just couldn't sleep, Alara whispered. Leora studied her, suspicion flickering in her green eyes. Is this about the forest again? You disappear at night. Come back looking like you've seen death itself. Alara, you need to stop wandering there. People are saying strange things, and if, enough. The word burst out sharper than intended. Alara winced at her friend's startled expression, lowering her voice. I just need space, Leora. Please. Hurt shadowed her friend's face, but Leora nodded slowly. Fine. But if you're in trouble, you will tell me. Promise. Alara forced herself to nod, though the promise splintered in her chest. They parted, and Alara turned down the narrow lane toward her home. The thatched roof came into view, the garden gate swinging gently in the breeze. For a moment, the sight soothed her. Here, at least, was normalcy, but as she pushed open the door, the air inside was heavy. Thick. Wrong. She froze. The small wooden table was exactly as she'd left it, the hearth unlit, the bed neatly made. Yet the silence was too deep, too intentional. Her pulse thudded as her eyes drifted to the window. The latch was unfastened. She always fastened it. Alara's breath quickened. Slowly, she crossed the room, her steps feather-light. She reached for the window, her fingers trembling, and stilled. Pressed faintly into the dust on the sill was the outline of a hand. Large, male. Her stomach dropped. She staggered back, heart hammering against her ribs. He had been here. The Alpha. Inside her home. Her knees buckled, but she caught herself on the table's edge, her mind racing. Why? To watch her? To remind her she wasn't safe even in her own walls. I don't hunt what's already mine. The memory of his voice wrapped around her again, suffocating. That a noise outside snapped her head up, the crunch of footsteps, deliberate and steady. Alara's breath locked in her throat. She darted to the window, peering out through the slit between curtain and wall. At first, nothing. Only the lane, the garden, the trees swaying at the edge of the village. Then, movement. A shadow, tall and broad, slipping between the cottages. Too swift, too silent to be ordinary. Her blood froze. The Alpha was watching. Not from the forest. Not from dreams. From here. Her hand flew to her mouth, stifling a cry. She staggered back from the window, her body shaking, her heart pounding so violently she thought it might shatter her ribs. What did he want from her? Why wouldn't he let her go? Her knees gave way, and she sank to the floor, pressing her forehead against her clasped hands. Tears pricked her eyes, spilling hot and unchecked down her cheeks. For the first time, she realized the truth. There was no escape. The Alpha wasn't bound to the forest. He wasn't a phantom of nightmares. He was real, and he was watching. And no wall of stone or wood could keep him from her. She had begged in tears, and he had answered. And now, the shadows belonged to him. Section 12. The claim in the shadows. The storm rolled in without warning. Clouds swallowed the moon in a single breath, plunging the village into a twilight that felt unnatural, oppressive. Wind rattled shutters and howled through narrow lanes like a chorus of unseen voices. Alara clutched the edge of her bed, staring at the unlatched window, every muscle taut with dread that he had been inside her home. She traced the memory of that handprint on the sill again and again in her mind, her pulse refusing to calm. It was no dream, no fleeting illusion of the night. The Alpha had touched her world, her safe space, and left his silent mark. She wanted to scream, to run, to pound on Leora's door and beg her to stay close. But her instincts told her it was useless. He would find her, no matter where she fled. Lightning flashed. For a split second, the room was illuminated, too bright, too sharp. And in that flash, Alara saw it, that a shadow standing just beyond her garden gate. Her breath caught in her throat, tears springing instantly to her eyes. She stumbled backward, hand pressed against her mouth to keep from crying out. He wasn't even hiding anymore. He wanted her to see. The next thunderclap shook the house, the sound crawling down her spine like cold fingers. And then, his voice, Alara. Her name, not shouted, not whispered, spoken low, almost reverent, as though the storm itself carried it. Her knees buckled, and she dropped to the floor, trembling. She told herself not to answer, not to make a sound, but her lips parted anyway, breath escaping in a broken whisper. Why? The silence that followed was deafening. She crawled toward the window, driven by something she didn't understand, and pressed herself against the wall just beside the frame. Slowly, she leaned forward, peeking out. The gate was open. The shadow was gone. Alara's heart slammed into her ribs. She stumbled back, clutching the shawl tighter around herself, her body shaking with fear. Then the door creaked. Her head whipped toward it, eyes wide. The latch, the one she had bolted, groaned as though pushed by invisible hands. Her breaths came shallow, her lungs refusing to expand. And then, he was there. Kalen, the Alpha, filled her doorway as if the storm itself had carved his form out of darkness. His broad shoulders blocked the frame, his presence bending the air. His eyes glowed faintly, catching the lightning, molten gold with a depth that could drown. Alara's back pressed to the wall. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. You shouldn't leave your window open, he murmured, his voice rich, heavy, laced with something primal. It tempts the wrong kind of visitor. Her body trembled so violently she could barely stand. Get out. He tilted his head, studying her with that unreadable calm. Do you truly want that? Her lips parted, words tangled in terror and fury. Yes. But even she heard the lie in her voice. His mouth curved, something between a smile and a threat. Your eyes say otherwise. Her heart seized. Anger burned through the fear, sharp and desperate. You've haunted me. You've followed me. Why? What do you want from me? Kalen stepped forward, the floorboards groaning under his weight. She pressed tighter to the wall. But he didn't close the distance fully, only enough for his scent to reach her, wild and intoxicating. A blend of rain-soaked earth and smoke. You begged beneath the trees, he said, his tone low, almost hypnotic. I came. Her mind reeled back to that night, to her tears staining the roots, to her desperate prayer whispered into the dark. She hadn't known anyone heard. She hadn't thought anyone could. I didn't mean for you, she choked out. The golden in his gaze flared, sharp and dangerous. Fate doesn't ask permission. Alara's chest heaved, her fingernails biting into the wood behind her. She wanted to scream at him, deny him, demand he leave her life untouched. But when his gaze locked with hers, the words died in her throat. There was something there, something raw, aching, unyielding, a loneliness so vast it mirrored her own, for a heartbeat. She forgot to be afraid. Kalen's hand lifted, slow, deliberate. He didn't touch her, not yet. His palm hovered just inches from her cheek, the air between them charged like the storm outside. Her skin tingled, alive with the threat of contact. I've watched you longer than you know, he said softly. Your strength, your sorrow, your defiance. They called to me. Tears blurred her vision. You've stolen my peace. You've made me a prisoner in my own skin. His jaw tightened, but he didn't move away. You're no prisoner, Alara. You're mine. The words broke something inside her. Her knees buckled again, but before she could fall, his hand caught her arm, firm and steady. The heat of his touch seared through her, setting fire to every nerve. She gasped, her body betraying her with a shiver that had nothing to do with fear. Let me go, she whispered, but the plea lacked conviction. Kalen's gaze burned, unrelenting. I could, but then, who would keep you safe? Her lips parted, confusion and disbelief tangling in her chest. Safe? You terrify me. His expression flickered, something dark and wounded slipping through the mask of alpha command. Sometimes what saves us feels like fear first. The storm outside roared louder, thunder rattling the walls. In its fury, the small cottage felt like the eye of something ancient and unstoppable. With the two of them at its center, Dalara's breath came fast, shallow, her tears hot against her cheeks. Every instinct screamed to run, yet every fiber of her body stayed locked in place. Caught in his gravity, Kalen's voice dropped to a whisper, his lips close enough for her to feel the heat of his words. The night you begged, you called to me. You asked for deliverance. I answered. Her vision blurred again, but this time from more than fear. Confusion, longing, anger, hope. They tangled until she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Why me? She asked, her voice breaking. His eyes softened, though the fire in them remained. Because the moon chose you, and I do not question the will of the moon. The storm cracked open above them, lightning bathing the room in silver. In that flash, she saw the alpha not as a monster, not as a shadow, but as a man, fierce, haunted, tethered to her in ways neither of them could undo. And for the first time, Alara understood that her world would never again be the same.